is there. We talked with him this morning, and so good to have you with us. John, as we think back on spring training so far and look forward to the final weeks of it and get set for the regular season, I want to think back to when you walked into your first Pirates training camp, the first time you were ever invited to big league camp. Who were some of the guys that were there, and what did you feel like as a young guy walking into that Pirates clubhouse?
Oh boy, I could take up all 10 minutes on that. I mean, I came up as like a minor leaguer, I think in 90, and got one at bat against Jeff Reardon, and that was obviously a thrill. But my first actual big league camp was 91, and I'm sure folks know I'm a Pittsburgher and a big Pirate fan. In 90, I actually went to the playoffs in Cincinnati as a fan, me and a buddy of mine, and then I went to winter ball. I went to Mexico right after the first two games in Cincinnati, and so to go into that clubhouse as a part of that team in 91 was obviously a thrill. And it was Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonilla and Jay Bell and Andy Van Slyke and Doug Drabick and John Smiley. And we can go on, Jeff King. And certainly it was a thrill, and it was nerve-wracking. And, just hanging out there, I was kind of in awe, just wide-eyed. And I didn't get very many at-bats. I can't even remember how many at-bats I got, and I wasn't there very long. And so I went back down to Double-A and worked my way up to Triple-A and got called up that summer. So I think in July, and made my debut in the middle of July of 91. And so, being in that clubhouse, that's the important thing about spring training and having so many guys in camp is you don't know who's going to get called up. And so you want to be familiar with how things work. And so, as much as I was kind of in awe and maybe a little uncomfortable in that first big league camp, I did get to meet some of the guys and work out with some of the guys, take grounders with the guys. And so when I got called up in 91, I was familiar. I had a couple of former teammates there that I can kind of go to and talk to and not be that uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To where, all of a sudden you're in a big league clubhouse, but it's not the first time you're in a big league clubhouse because you were in spring training. And so that is obviously very, very important. But, you get kind of used to it. I got to play a lot that year, and, then you kind of feel very comfortable. And so, it's certainly a thrill and certainly I think a necessary thing just to kind of get the guy familiar with how things work in a big league clubhouse.
Yeah, and I would guess that in that particular clubhouse where you had all kinds of characters and dynamic going on there, that would be pretty amazing. And of course, the big thing is you get to be around Jim Leyland.
Yes, obviously Jim Leyland, and then that's a story I've told on the air. I don't know if you folks in Indiana heard it or not, but about a week before I got called up, Jim Leyland was they had to land a plane on a road trip because he had some heart pain, or he was uncomfortable, so they had to check his heart, and then they moved on. He checked out okay, so I got called up a week later, and again I saw these guys but didn't really know anybody, didn't know what to do with myself. I'm walking around and I go to the lunchroom and Leyland comes walking in and he sees me and he looks up and he says, "Wehner, shoot, heard you were coming, almost had a heart attack," and walked out. And so kind of how he lightens the mood a little bit. He rips on you and makes fun of you, and then he moves on. And so Leyland was great, and he took good care of me. He kind of made me the utility player I ended up being. He took me to Florida with him, and that was certainly a thrill. And he kept things loose, and that was the cool thing about that 91 team. They had a basketball hoop in there, a mini hoop, and they used to have tournaments, and so it brought everybody together. And there were a bunch of characters on that team, but boy, they got along. It might be the best clubhouse I've ever been in. That 91 team, they were just awesome.
Well, a big league camp like that, and you get around the Pirates of that time, compare that to what it's like in Bradenton now. People say that it's much more of a business now, but it was a business environment in some aspects as well back then. Is it all that different now? Well,
I mean, maybe a little bit. I think with technology and the phones and the iPads and the analytics and everything else like that, I think you're more likely to see guys kind of hanging out by their locker and looking at their phones or their iPads or watching video of, the picture they're facing, or looking at past at bats, or, looking at their last outing on the mound. And so, I do think, you build friendships and bonds, and, and there are times that, there's a lot of fun in that clubhouse, but I think it's a little more subdued just because there's way more distractions, and way more things to kind of analyze, and to a point, I think it might be too much information's out there, for these guys. But there are times where I think this generation are really locked into their electronics at times too much. And I don't spend a whole lot of time in the clubhouse. And again, I think the guys will tell you it is like a family, and they're very close, and they have fun and do a lot of things together. But I think it's the clubhouse itself is maybe a little more business-like now than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I imagine. Hey, the Pirates made a whole bunch of moves at the trade deadline last year, and they brought in a whole bunch of different guys. One of the intriguing names they brought in was Nick York, a guy that, like most of the players that you get in a Bucco uniform these days, he can play multiple positions. Have you got a chance to look at Nick York all that much, to look at the way that he plays the game and see his approach at the plate? And what's your impression of him? Because he intrigues me.
Very, very impressed with Nick York. He's really put together. It's kind of surprising because I haven't seen him get much action at second base, and I know he's played a lot of second, but he's a bigger-bodied guy. I mean, he's thick. He's not your thin little second baseman that's uber quick, and he's a bigger guy, and so I don't know where he's at defensively. I just haven't seen him get enough work or get him enough action over there. But as a hitter, I like him a lot. I mean, he's stocky. He has a short swing. He can hit for power. He can hit with two strikes. You don't see a lot of chase from him. He hits the ball to all fields. It wouldn't surprise me to see him make this club out of spring training, and it might not be at second. It might be more at first. I think right now, that's where he'll be, on the right side of the infield. And with Spencer Horwitz, the guy they traded to play first base, being out at least the first couple of weeks, it might be Nick York to get some playing time. But he's a guy just 22 years old. Looks really good to me. I think he has a bright future. I definitely think he can hit and hit for power. Defensively, like I said, I just haven't seen much go his way, so I really can't judge that just yet. But I love the approach at the plate. I love the way he attacks pitchers, and how well he knows the zone, especially for a younger guy.
There are a lot of guys that the Pirates have in their system right now, middle infield type guys that can swing over to shortstop a little bit, but second base, and a bunch of them can also play on the corners and even in the outfield. They've got some options for the future there right now, and it'll be really fascinating to watch how this all shakes out with all of these bodies. Right,
yeah. Usually if you can draft or acquire via trade, athletes that can move around, it certainly can help. And I think we're seeing more of that these days, to where every team, just because of the way the roster is and how many pitchers teams carry, you might only have a couple of guys on the bench that, offensive guys on the bench, to where, you'd like them to be more versatile, where you don't have to carry a backup middle infielder. You don't have to carry just a slugging left-handed bat fourth outfielder. You can have, a couple of guys that can play 4, 5, 6 positions, because that way, if a right fielder gets banged up, you can throw a guy in right. If a third baseman gets banged up, you can throw him there, or same with second or short. And so certainly adds value, and I think we're seeing more of that these days, just because at times there's only 3 guys on the bench, and one of them's a backup catcher. And so the other 2, you want to have flexibility, guys that can move around a little bit. And so, we do have a number of guys that can play, especially in the middle, can play second, short, and, as well as the corners, and go run out to the outfield. So I think that's pretty important just about every organization these days.
Well, we had our Heritage Conference Media Day for our local high school baseball teams yesterday, and talking to those coaches there, those guys, everybody has a first baseman's mitt and an infielder's glove and an outfielder's glove, and some of them have catcher's mitts too. That position versatility is something every high school coach does. You grow up playing that way. Why not continue it through your pro career? If you make yourself more versatile with more positions, you make yourself more valuable to your organization.
Yeah, for sure. Typically, your better athletes are going to be in the middle, especially shortstop, because that's where you're going to see more action typically as a younger player in the middle infield than you are going to see in the outfield. And so you usually stick your best players there and leave them there. You don't usually want to move them around that much just because you want the ball hit to your best athletes. And so, being more versatile and for that matter, to go a step further, playing other sports, I think, is important. Basketball, football, as well as baseball or soccer or lacrosse. I mean, it does nothing but help. To me, I think certain sports have become too specialized to where, you don't gain experience in other sports, which I think can help you as you climb the ladder, whether it's high school, college, or even pro ball. And so, it does nothing but gives you a different perspective. There's different movements. There's different throws. There's so many different things to think about. When you're moving around to where you think the game better. You think the game as an outfielder, as an infielder, as a first baseman. I talked to Adam Frazier the other day about this. I mean, it's totally different than the other positions. People don't realize that. Every other position, you're going after the ball. At first base, you're running away from the ball. There's so many things that a first baseman has to do that people don't think about. Balls hit the center field, you got to run behind the pitcher's mound. Balls hit to your right, you're running away from it to cover the bag. And so, and so the more I became a utility guy, I mean, I loved it because I thought the game differently in right field than I did at third base or at first base or in center. I caught a little bit too, and so you see a different perspective there. So, it does nothing but I think make you a better baseball player by moving around.
John Wehner, did you ever pitch in a major league game? You were ever one of those guys?
No, I was so mad I never got the chance. I pitched in a handful of minor league games out of necessity, but never in the big leagues. I've always wanted to play all nine. And there was maybe a couple of opportunities in all my years where a position player pitched, and the one time I was hurt, the other time they went with, I think, John Cangelosi, so I was mad at Leyland for that one.
Well, you would have given him the heart attack then. Hey,
for sure.
Hey, John, thanks for a great week.
Okay, Todd, thank you.
Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
John Wehner and the Pirates. It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com.